Welcome back to another monthly bullet journal setup. Today I'm setting up my journal for September. If you're new here, I'm Nay and this is Nay's Crafty World, where I make videos setting up my bullet journal planner for your inspiration. So if you are looking for some new ideas to use in your own bullet journal, stick around. The theme this month is apple trees, or the harvest season. We're reaching the end of summer now. Not that the temperature's changing yet. It's still hot and humid where I live, but we have been getting more stormy evenings in the last few weeks, and that's a telltale sign of autumn approaching. I live in central Vietnam, and here it's very much evergreen. So fall or autumn here really means that it's rainy season. I'm very much craving autumn and cozy vibes, but we're not quite there yet. So I decided to do a little in-between theme this month. For the last month of summer, before I fully jump into spooky, cozy Halloween vibes for October. For the cover page, I used my fine liner pens to roughly sketch a tree, and I used watercolor paint to paint in the leaves. I mixed the 3 different shades of green for the leaves to help create more dimension. The first being a dark green, the second a lighter, more diluted green, and the third one a muddy green. Making the leaves, I just randomly touched the tip of the brush to the page so that it has that pointy leaf shape. I started with only using 1 shade of green at a time, but while that shade was on the brush, I would dip it into the water, which dilutes the paint more and makes the color lighter. In between each shade, I would wait for the paint on the paper to mostly dry so that they wouldn't end up running and bleeding into each other. I also tried to move the brush and hold it at different angles so that the leaves wouldn't all look exactly the same. After that first layer of leaves, I let the page dry completely and then started on the second layer of leaves. Letting the paint dry fully means that when I add the second layer, I could go over some of the first leaves without them just bleeding into one another and making a big blob of paint. These top leaves are also much darker, creating more depth. I really enjoy using watercolor paint. I'm not the best painter, but I feel like with watercolors you can be a lot more free and have fun with it, and it'll still look good at the end. After finishing up the leaves, I mixed a very muddy green, almost like an olive color, for the tree trunk. First, I wanted to leave it with no color, but it looked like something was missing, so I used this very light color to just add a slight shade to the tree trunk. Some of the leaves were still a little wet, so this did cause them to bleed a little, but I think that just made it look better. Using some tissue, I soaked up some of the paint that was pooling on the page to help it dry faster and not run on the page. At the bottom of the tree, I again added a light shade to make the painting look less empty and unfinished. I'm super happy with how this turned out. It's a very basic painting with little details, but I think it looks great and it's really easy to do. After everything had dried completely, I went in with some green washi tape and a quote strip that says, "Find your inner peace." Last month, I found myself constantly flipping to my cover page to check the mini calendar while planning out my weeks, which is why I put it there in the first place, to make sure that I actually use my cover page instead of forgetting that it exists. So this month I'm adding another mini calendar. I made a bunch of these little calendars on the cream dot grid paper, so you will probably be seeing them in the future setups as well. For the final touch on this page, I used my alphabet stamp set to stamp out September so that it can go on top of the tree. On this next page, I wanted to have a dashboard where I could plan my month and track some events, make a big to-do list, and schedule my media posts. So I decided to combine my cover page and dashboard by cutting out a Dutch door. For the peekaboo section of the Dutch door, I used this olive brown paper from Notebook Therapy's junk journal box set and cut it out so that when you open the Dutch door, there's a section where I can have my dashboard. For my to-do list, I used this label and some stickers from that same junk journal scrapbook box set. I'll be using this as my main to-do list for the month. The dashboard titles, I again used my alphabet stamps for the titles with some bullets under each title. I decided to include 3 sections, the first being for my goals for the month. The next one is media. This is where I'll write down all of my social media posts that I want to make during September on Instagram and on YouTube. And lastly, I have an event section for any holidays or school events that we'll be having. Many of the schools here are starting back up after summer, so we will be having a lot of back to school events and have fun activities planned for September. Moving on to my mood tracker. I wanted to try and do a double spread for this month, but also keep it pretty simple. I went ahead and lightly sketched out a tree with my pencil and then went over it with my Sakura Pigma liner pen. I've only recently started to use these kinds of mood trackers. I really like how they look, and at the end of the month, once it's completely filled in, it looks so good. It also helps me check in with myself and my journal at the end of each day, but I do definitely forget to fill it in sometimes. So every now and again I have to backtrack and fill in the last few days all at once. At the bottom of the page, I used some of the scrap paper that was left over from the Dutch door to make a mood tracker heading. I used some tea-stained paper to stamp on and then added some washi tapes and stickers. When I plan my themes, I try to stick with the same or similar colors on each page because I like every spread to have its own style and layout, but I still want everything to match the theme. So usually I try to use the same washi tapes on each of the spreads so that they have the same elements to bring all of the pages together. For the next page, I couldn't help but go back to a more scrapbooky theme for my habit tracker. First, I started with some tea-stained paper for the background and then just continued to layer different paper, stickers and washi tape on top. Like I've mentioned before, I don't plan these kinds of pages in detail. I usually have an idea of what I want the tracker to look like, but other than that, I just look at my ephemera that I have and I play around with the different paper. My final spread for this monthly setup before I move on to my weekly pages is my finance tracker. I recently started using a finance tracker again. It's still very much in its developmental stage, so each month it changes ever so slightly until I eventually decide on which one I like the most. This month I've added a daily spending section where I can write down how much money I spend every day. Like for example, if I go to the mini mart to buy some milk and bread, or if I stop to buy a coffee on my way to work. Moving on to my weekly spreads, this is where I usually write down my class schedules, to-do lists and daily entries for each day of the week. I noticed that I started to write down my class schedule on each day, but I just kind of wrote it down in a corner somewhere on the page wherever I found a spot. So this month I decided that I would try having a specific section available for me to write down my class schedule separately so that I'd have a bit more space for my daily entries. People often ask me what bullet journaling is and how I use my journal, and the best description I found without going into an in-depth description, is to say that my bullet journal is a kind of planner that I can change every month to fit my needs at the time. It's ever-changing and it evolves with me. For my weeklies, they all usually look exactly the same, just with a bit of a different color or a different ephemera. So I went ahead and completed all of the weeklies in advance, and you'll be able to see all of them in the flip through. I'd like to thank you all so much for being here with me and sticking around. Remember to like my video and comment down below. I do so love to hear what you all think. Thanks again for being here, and I hope that you have a very crafty day.